Okay, welcome again, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on community participation. This is Wednesday, day 3 of our ongoing Transition to Adulthood Week. And just for those of you who don't know, we do a Transition to Adulthood conference every year, parent conference. It's great, big success. Lots of people come out. We've done it for 10 years. This is the 11th year. Of course, we couldn't gather in person this year. So we're doing this, a whole week of virtual events, informative videos, live on-demand webinars, and this is just one part of it. We're going to be talking to a panel today about community participation, and I'd like to introduce my panelists today, my RIPIN colleagues. First of all, Sue Donovan. Sue is here, along with Crystal Cerullo. They both work on our Parent Training Information Center team, part of our Transition to Adulthood team. And we are super excited to be joined today by a couple of guests. First is Kiernan O'Donnell, Key. Key was raised by an advocate of people with disabilities and learned the power of inclusion at an early age. Key currently serves as the Director of Day and Employment Services at the Fogarty Center, is an ACRE instructor at the Sherlock Center, is co-president for the Rhode Island Association of People Supporting Employment First, and he's delegate for the Northeast region of the National APSE Board of Directors. Key is a father and husband who enjoys riding his motorcycle. He's a wordsmith who channels his advocacy in the form of hip hop. Welcome, Key. And we are also joined today by Susan Hayward. Susan Hayward's the administrator of the transition services within the Division of Developmental Disabilities. She's a licensed social worker with over 30 years experience in the field. Susan was mentored by the pioneers of deinstitutionalization and community inclusion in Rhode Island, and she's committed to carrying that good work forward. Welcome, Susan. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
And we are very happy to have you. For folks who are joining us today on Zoom, I want to let you know our presentation is being recorded. We are also live streaming to our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. And whether you're with us on Zoom, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook, please, we want your questions for our panelists today. You can type your questions into the chat here on Zoom, into the chat on YouTube, into the comments on Facebook. Please type them in as they come to you, and we will relay them to our panelists who will do their best to answer them. They really are here to answer your questions, so please don't be shy. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our guests. They have a few slides they'd like to present and a few things to get us started.
Sure, I'll kick it off here. First of all, I just want to say I know that Key and I are so very appreciative to have the opportunity to participate in this webinar today and talk about what it means to be connected with a community and how we go about doing that. And I thought perhaps I would start our discussion talking a bit about connections and relationships. So, you know, we know many things in our life are important: our jobs, our finances, our health, our opportunities to direct our own lives. But if we really think about it, think deeply about what's important and what we truly need, what gives us a rich life, a life with meaning and purpose and comfort and joy, it's our connections with others, meaningful relationships, someone to turn to for companionship and to share experiences. And when we have these meaningful relationships, we feel joy together. We can work through sorrow or anger, or talk about issues that concern us, or topics that create enthusiasm or curiosity for us. And relationships also give us opportunity to use our gifts in our interactions, maybe to provide comfort to someone who's hurting. When I was thinking about this webinar and what would be really important and good to talk about, I was thinking about what is it that causes your life to feel full? What are those times when our life has felt like really it was very rich? And I know for me, it's been when I've shared something with someone else. I feel as if we all have a very strong need to belong, to have a sense of being part of something larger than ourselves. And when I was thinking too about when does that start for us? When do we start feeling like we are connected with other people and we start feeling as if we are part of something bigger than just our own small selves. I think that initially it happens through others. It happens through our parents or our caregivers, our family. We go to school and we start making friends there. We start feeling connections with others that really start to expand our life. And perhaps when we're young, we feel part of our school community, especially so, I think, perhaps in our early years. And then over time, we start making our own friends. You know, we have extended family that we're interacting with. We perhaps maybe have some neighbors that we're feeling connected to. We have teachers that we feel close to. Perhaps people in the community we meet, like maybe through sports teams or clubs that we belong to, maybe through some faith-based organizations. And we really start to understand and realize that there's a larger community that we can feel connected with and that we even can contribute to. And I really, in thinking again about this, I was thinking about how these connections to this larger community, they help us feel happy in a new way. They help us develop other skills and other feelings about ourselves. They help us become more confident. And I think that our connections with our community also help our communities be stronger and healthier too. So I know many of us, I think, understand what it's like to feel connected to someone through a similar interest or a similar life experience, but we also all understand what it's like to feel lonely and disconnected. And our responses to that are different. Perhaps we might retreat. We might, over time, begin to choose not to interact with others. Maybe we start feeling a little angry or cynical or frightened without even realizing it. Maybe we do some acting out or, you know, have some kind of reaction to that causes other people to feel uncomfortable. But even if we choose a solitary life, it's part of our common humanity to feel connected to others, to a community, to enjoy the resources available to the community, to contribute, even if it's just in a small way. We really are, as one of the people I like to follow, David Petoniak, has said, we are hardwired to connect with each other. So again, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking if you've ever, let's say, volunteered your time, maybe helped another person, even just had a moment where you smiled or caught the eye of someone across a crowded room and had that moment of connection, it's really wonderful. We need it. We need connection with others to grow, to live in this world, to flourish. So that brings us to the question of how do we build community and build friendships? You read my mind, Kay. So this, I think, especially now, is a very hard thing to do in our culture. And one of the reasons for that is because, at least in the way that I've been viewing it, is that there are screens everywhere, screens that pull our gaze away from the world around us. We all are using cell phones. And if you have ever stood in line somewhere or been even in a restaurant or even sometimes in a meeting, many times people have their heads down looking at their looking at their cell phone rather than being aware of their surrounding. And I think we need to be very mindful about pulling our heads up, looking around, and getting outside our comfort zone. Building a life isn't just about schedules and being busy. It's also about truly connecting and building relationships, building connections in our communities. It's about thinking about and planning for what you want your life to look like. So part of what we're talking about and going to be talking about today is how do we help young people do this? Learning how to be self-determined, learning how to advocate for yourself, learning how to direct your own life. These are paths to building relationships and community connections. And these also help us develop things in other areas. It helps develop our self-worth, helps us with our decision-making, finding a job, developing confidence, being productive and independent. Sometimes we get bogged down. We get bogged down in the demands of life and the struggles we have, and we forget to look toward our future or even our everyday with imagination and hope and to think about what's possible. Everyone has a gift. Everyone has a creative outlet. Everyone has the ability to make a contribution. We can help young adults build self-determination and self-direction and build relationships with others based on interests and abilities and not disability. But before I talk anymore or even turn it over to Key, I thought I would really like to check in with our friends and colleagues at RIPIN and see or hear about their thoughts on this.
Thanks, Susan. I know when going through the journey with my own child and working with families at RIPIN, finding your place in the community can be challenging sometimes, especially when you're a little different than the other, third grade girls. I remember my daughter coming home in 6th grade and saying to me, I want to sit at the cool girls table. And I said, oh, maybe the cool girls, maybe they're cool, but maybe they aren't the, best group for you to hang with. You've got to meet different people and really look for girls that have your, similar interests it always in middle school, it's a struggle, that identity. So to be a little different, that even makes it more challenging. So we tried everything, leave no stone unturned. We joined groups. We investigated what was going on at the library. We joined Scouts. We did everything, and we, took the good from it, and things that worked well, we continued, and things that didn't work well, we recalculated like a GPS.
Yes.
So, but it's really helping your child develop that self-determination, those self-advocacy skills where they can articulate what it is that they need to be successful, what it is that they need to make them happy. Really is practice, practice and a safety net. I learned quickly at an early age that my picking the friend for my son, well, I have 3 children, but one of my sons and my daughter, that was never a good idea. I'm not a good matchmaker. I am not a good matchmaker. And I remember after one play date one day, my son coming up to me and saying, don't ever invite that kid over again. And I said, okay, sorry, that wasn't a good fit. But you've got to do your homework and you've got to do your research and you've got to be patient. And like you said, really looking at your gifts and your abilities. And before, a few years ago, we discovered a lovely little playhouse theater in West Warwick. And my daughter was very, very comfortable and very happy in that environment. And we visited it many times for different performances and different events. And I know that once we get through our current situation and things start to reopen, that we'll be back at that community, because that creativity and the people that we met there and that she met there, she made connections and she really thrived in that environment. So you really have to keep an open mind and be willing to lean into your discomfort and try things that, maybe you're not always, comfortable trying, but you have to keep an open mind.
Yeah, I think that's such a great way to describe it, Sue, because, it's the genuineness of it. And for a parent, the genuineness of that is that you want your child to be connected. You want them to have friends. You want them to feel as if they're part of the world. And yet they don't know themselves that well yet. And so in our desire to take care of and protect and even nudge forward, sometimes we go toward things that maybe they're not interested in. And so it's, in some ways, it's a stepping back a little bit, but also continuing to give that encouragement and helping to figure out how can you help your child develop the skills to be able to do some of these things independently.
And making sure that they have the appropriate support. And
yes.
that's a dance, and that's okay. But that was a dance that my husband and I learned how to do well. It's like, okay, she was very successful in Girl Scouts, but she needed a certain level of support around that, and then there were things that you could back away from, and she could do more independently. And so you have to be willing to strike that balance. And as a parent or caregiver, you have to be open minded and realize that sometimes another adult or someone's going to ask you to step away, back off a little bit. We need some space. Or they may call you and say, hey, you know what? We need a little bit more support. Do you think you could attend for the first half hour of the session of this club or this activity or this project, so you can't take offense. You can't have thin skin. You have to be a team player.
Yeah, it's hard to do that because this feels like a risky world, and we are sometimes bombarded with the stuff that doesn't go well in the news or elsewhere, rather than that is happening and the good things that are in existence. And sometimes we don't know where to look. Sometimes we need other people to help us see a little bit differently. It's a tough position to be in, but it's possible. We're surrounded by so many people who can help us and can help us see differently.
It's true.
Key, I'm thinking this might be a good time for you to perhaps talk about some of the things that you've experienced or that you're aware of and that you wanted to share with us today.
Sure, it'd be my pleasure. So I really appreciate the comments that were just shared about what I call social capital, or what every person, regardless of who they are or where they came from, has. Now, social capital might be a term that's familiar to some, but not familiar to others. So just to give you a little context, social capital can be a lot of things. What social capital should always be is something that's meaningful to the individual. Social capital can include a variety of things, including your network, your passions, your interests, maybe your contributions, maybe your gifts, all the things that we talked about that are crucial components of relationship building also fall into social capital. So when I hear Sue talk about the importance of self-determination, I start to think about, in my life, what have been some effective strategies that have helped individuals and families, I'll just say, get on the same page. Because we've all experienced that before. Being a parent myself now, start to understand a little bit more about that. But when people don't feel like others are on the same page, they may express things, let's just say, not the most constructively, because they're trying to get their message across. And one of the most things I found to be really intimidating for individuals and families has been, sometimes out of some really good person-centered planning, but wondering now how that plan might be able to become an actual strategic plan with action steps that we can feel progress, embrace the success, large and small, along the way. So what we have in front of us right now is an individual who I know that I'm not naming, who is a young lad who has some interests out there, some connections, some dreams, like maybe meeting that comedian Jay Leno. Maybe want to get a job with cars down the road. He doesn't know. He's still very young. He's also an outdoorsman. And although he might only be able to physically use half of his body, has learned from his uncle using a jig how to make some pretty cool flies. So he's thought too, maybe I might want to open my own business someday. The aspirations that we all want, that we all ask people, what they want to be when they grow up, really should be the constant questions and opportunity to self-determine along the way so that they can show the world who they want to be. And parents, take a step back sometimes, as Sue says. And when I say your child is in the driver's seat, I can mean that literally. What I'm talking about today really is about the driver's seat of life. And that's where I found what's helped us drive around traditionally, things like maps and GPSs, use the technology. It should be the same types of things that help us navigate, charter the life course. So when we're starting to get potentially a little intimidated by all of these really cool things that came out of person-centered planning, We always want to make sure it doesn't fall short and become person-centered promising, where we've helped change one's expectations, but not shown them a pathway on how to do it. So I am a big proponent of enhancing people's social capital and their self-advocacy through what's known as mapping. Now, mapping has been called a lot of things. Just when they say, as they say many times, there's an app for that, I like to say there's a map for that. And many times when mapping is being identified, it's called community mapping. I think that's great and all, but I also think it's a low bar. Also, I think sometimes when we start to engage in community mapping, I like to call social capital mapping, we start to think most about what types of things the community can do for our loved ones, when really we need to broaden our horizons and think less about participation and more about contributions, because we also want people to be valued as they're experiencing and interacting in the community. So what has changed in front of you on this graphic is some of the auxiliary things, those goals, those thoughts, those interests, those passions haven't changed. The person's still there and still wanting to do those things. But what we started to do is through some of these proven strategies, identify whether it's people, places, or things that maybe the person has connection to that might be a natural way of being able to build off of that and build capacity and show their place in community. So for instance, this person who maybe had those interests of tying their own flies or working with cars, well, let's look at where they are right now. They might be in a Facebook group. You might be able to connect them to another Facebook group that might actually connect them to a physical place like the car museum, where who knows, you might meet that Jay Leno, and maybe in the same breath, maybe make some connections through, say, your dad's friend Rick, who works at an auto detail shop, to learn more about cars and see if that is a pathway that you want to pursue for a career. On the flip side, that interest around maybe self-employment, again, just an interest, a thought, a passion. Maybe, and to the point of Sue's using the faith community, maybe Pastor Jill, who runs that fishing and faith club, might be able to connect us with some businesses that maybe this person might be able to build up some marketing base, while at the same time, maybe getting some skill sets through the DD Council, Sue Babin self-employment classes that have been proven very effective, taking hobbies and turning them into real enterprise. This is how a person doesn't just draw from the community, but draws from their experiences and contributions in the community to be able to grow. I love this process because this does not mean for, this means with. You encourage the person to be the driver's seat in life. We're just the folks who are here with the maps, giving suggestions. Ultimately, you're in control of where you want to go. And also, I think, take the disability aside. Is this not a proven strategy that all of us use? We've all heard the saying, sometimes it's not just what you know, it's who you know. Let's build off of that. And this should be a process, as I'll get to in the next slide, that should be returned and I say revisited many, many times, because the more opportunities that people have to self-determine their lives, the stronger those skill sets that Sue talked about that she wants for her daughter Kelly to be enforced with for that next step in life. And what I'll say too, guys, is when we want to make sure it's about relationship building, that is not a numbers game. And although integration is very important, in my mind, that's a baseline standard and a numbers game. We really want to look to beyond integration, inclusion, and what types of things was that young lad looking for in a car shop, that culture to be included. Because certainly you can be doing things that you are great at in a company that pays you well. And if you don't enjoy your work culture, the job still is a bad job at the end of the day. So we want to look beyond just the front door of opportunity and really see how it finds its place with relationship building. So where does your child start? You're probably wondering. A lot of fancy slides, a lot of information. Sometimes, again, that can be intimidating. And I'm here to tell you that you already have started. You need to take confidence and reassurance in that. Life is very complicated. It is a composite. So when we start to think about how we got to where we are now, it's about the decisions we've made informing the next decisions. Sometimes that can change the way that we approach challenges or opportunity. And so I like to present to you a little graphic I made. I call Put the Fun in the Funnel. This is also supportive of a best practice strategy. I'm not going to use the acronym, but it's called the School-Based Self-Determination Career Development Model. And all I want for you to really think about within that long name is that people have already started their life. They have interests. For this particular young man, it's a lot of outdoorsy type things, but he also is a big foodie and loves his jams. We start to think about how in middle school and high school, the role of being introduced lightly to maybe a tour or a conversation, an informational interview on businesses might help further define what it is we really want to try out. And maybe that means in high school, we're looking at maybe 4 to 6 more long-term paid or unpaid experiences. So by the time that we start to reach transition in that adult life, we know what we want. We're going to hold those who want to support us accountable because we have the guidance, we have the vision, and we are now practicing self-determination to reinforce what we want, even when it's not going the way that we intended. And that, folks, is also the right to risk. I did not work at Kentucky Fried Chicken for my career. I worked there, and not to date myself because now it's called KFC, but I went there to see if I could get a date with someone who it ended up not working out with anyway. From those experiences, I gathered more, and as a composite, found myself in hopefully a niche in a profession, helping people with disabilities and barriers find careers. These are the kinds of components that we need in the system. And when I say in the system, I mean we need people who can help self-determine their own lives to change the way the system supports them.
Yeah, I think a big
I would
thing
ask
too.
to someone from RIPIN, maybe Crystal or Sue, how have you found approaches like this? And I will say they should be like a resume or like in life, living and breathing. So that funnel you can always add to. Has that been an effective practice?
Well, I think a big thing to point out too, with a lot of people, they might struggle with anybody, is you actually have to try to have some experiences so that you can build on that and figure out what your interests are and what you don't like and what you might want to do. So I think that's a big thing, is a lot of people may have not actually had many experiences to really build, you know, their interest or what their strengths are, or know what they want to advocate for to do. So I think that's definitely a starting point, is trying to push people to out of their comfort zone to maybe have some experiences. I know right now it might be challenging with COVID going on, but there is a lot of like autism projects having a lot of virtual different meetings, and meetup.com has different virtual kind of things that you can participate in that you might be interested in. So I think even right now you can still try to start working on that and just figuring out, having experiences, talking to other people and figuring out what you like and what your interests are and what you want to do.
I agree, Crystal. And I know at the beginning of this pandemic, the first couple months were very difficult in the Donovan household until we were all able to embrace technology and learn it. And we were lucky enough to have a direct support worker who was determined to teach herself and then help teach my daughter. And in doing that, she was able to connect with friends, with peers. She started watching, I guess I haven't done this yet, but apparently Netflix, or you can watch a movie together. So that's been a popular activity. Many of the families that we've worked with over the years really have worked hard at identifying those gifts that their children have that that aren't on the surface. They're not easy to see. They're not easy to recognize. We had one family whose son, he kind of a loner. He wanted to go out in the community, but he didn't like to be in big groups. Not super verbal, kind of quiet and to himself. Certainly, he was social distancing before it was in vogue. And what the family realized was he loved to bake. He loved baking and he was good at it. And with a little bit of support, he started baking cookies, packaging them. And, you know, mom started with bringing a basket to work. And oh my gosh, you know, they were delicious and people were scooping them up and buying them. And then they went from that to he started delivering because he liked those little visits. He had done some work with Meals on Wheels, and he loved, you know, arriving with food, but it was like, I don't want to stay too long. Here you go, have a great day, and then he'd leave. So the baking and the cookies took off. And through networking within the family and, you know, family friends, this young man developed maybe half a dozen different customers, businesses that he went to. And when we saw him coming, it was like cheers. Everybody knows your name because, oh my gosh, you're that guy that makes those delicious cookies. And again, it was almost by accident. You know, sometimes we discover these things by accident. So you're always, you just, no stone unturned. You have to keep your eyes open for those moments where you might find a fit. And I know it can be very difficult. You know, especially if you have a child that's nonverbal or maybe isn't the most social or socially awkward or maybe resistant to trying new things.
Yeah, so I wonder if I could jump in real quick because we have a couple of questions that have come in that are really related to what we're talking about. One of our Facebook audience members is asking, how can we as parents help a child who feels socially awkward interact with other children that also have similar interests like art, dance, drama, etc., what have you? So how can parents help their child who is socially awkward? And that was a great story that you just gave about the person who liked baking and delivering those cookies was like just the right amount of social interaction for that person. But what are some other ways that parents can help their kids get that social interaction that we all know that we need, but that for some kids and young adults comes a little less naturally than others?
I'd like to share another story, and some of my friends here may be able to help me with it, and as it comes to mind. So a young woman, it was Valentine's Day, and the art teacher decided they were going to make art projects, right, to send home. You're going to make something for mom or dad or grandma, whoever you live with at home. And this young woman uses American Sign Language to communicate. And the teacher took a picture of this woman, the student's hands signing "I love you," and then they framed it, and that went home, and that was a gift for mom for Valentine's Day. Well, mom loved it. She really loved it. And fast forward, mom supported her daughter and her team, the IEP team, different people on that team helped support this young lady to develop a business out of it post high school. Okay. And oh, actually, I have something right here that I could share. Emily's Creations. And this particular one I bought for myself because I want to remind myself every day, love who you are. And I want to remember that I need to love who I am. And so the artist, Emily, her and her mom have been a friend of RIPIN now for a number of years because our paths have crossed many times. And she's working closely with Sue Babin's group and the Rhode Island Developmental Disabilities Council and learning how to grow that business. And they opened up an Etsy shop online, and it really took them, kind of like that Dr. Seuss book, it took them to places they never imagined they'd be going to. And this is a young woman who is nonverbal. You know, she uses American Sign Language to communicate. And gosh, I remember, you know, I know Emily and her mom, or Emily and one of her workers, they're invited to so many different things now because of the work and because of the business. So they connected with some art groups in Pawtucket, and they connected with some co-ops, you know, that you share space and you can sell your artwork. She's very connected to the Rhode Island art community, which is an awesome thing. Oh, I think you've got more questions in the chat, Mark.
Yeah, we've got some questions now, and I'm glad you mentioned that story about the sign language, Emily, and because one of the other questions was, you know, this sounds great what you're talking about. This sounds great for a child who is verbal, but what about a young adult who struggles with communication, has more significant needs? So I'm glad you gave that example, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that, because I think that we get this kind of frequently, where it's, oh, that's really interesting what you're talking about. That sounds good, but it won't apply to my child. What do you say to that?
So I would say a couple of years ago, a pretty well-known filmmaker by the name of Dan Habib was looking to celebrate and embrace success in Rhode Island, and was looking for, you know, certain types of profiles of people, which certainly in my capacity could have given a reference to. But I said, Dan, you know, let's challenge ourselves here. I love success stories, but too often do I think that they focus on a typical type of person with disabilities at a typical point in their life. And actually, I've also experienced that with some families, those success stories can actually be intimidating when it was not the intent. So I like to focus on what's known as the struggle and the strategy to success. And so I talked to Dan, the filmmaker, and said, Dan, you know, actually, let's talk about a young woman who isn't employed yet, who has multiple disabilities, both physically as well as cognitively, and also comes from a community that maybe recently immigrated, that has some cultural and language barriers and some socioeconomic challenges from a neighborhood that I also shared with her in Providence. And with that same person, using a lot of these strategies that we're talking about, including mapping, found that the power of siblings, namely her brother Stephen, was one of those catalysts that helped open up opportunity. Because I'm a firm believer that even with limited experience, the right supports, people can achieve their dreams. It's more about the community seeing value in the person and opening up opportunity, which I think, you know, we all own a little slice of that pie with. So I'm very much a proponent for the keep it real conversation, and young woman behind me on the wall there would agree.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's a poignant question, Mark, that's being raised. And I actually happen to Belanger made a comment in the chat there about just getting into the community as much as possible and being part of life around you as much as you possibly can, as much as it feels uncomfortable. Because in some ways, exposure and challenges eventually lead us to something that will be beautiful. It's just getting through the difficult part. You know, it's tough. It's tough when you know, we have a way of functioning, you know, we have a way of interacting with the world that seems typical, so to speak, for many, but then we have a family member who interacts differently. And so it makes us nervous. We get worried. We don't want to offend people, and we don't want our family member to be hurt. And we start struggling about how can we do this in the way that we know. And what we need is ways that we don't know, you know, ways that we can really pay attention to our family member, figure out how are they communicating, what is it that they're trying to say, and then help connect them perhaps with people of similar interests, people of different opportunity to try to just make that happen. It's not an easy question. It's a tough question. It's a tough thing to do.
It's a lot of work, and I know I find it difficult to be objective when it comes to my own children. So I need to have people that know and love my child in the room and get ideas and input from them. For many years, I had decided that my daughter was going to be a librarian because she loved to read. She was an avid reader. And even though we were asked to leave a few times from, story time in the children's library, not everyone, likes those little yelling loud children. And there were times where we had to leave, make a quick exit. But I was determined that she was going to be a librarian. And finally, my sister-in-law said to me, "Have you met your daughter?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And she's like, "Sue, she likes books. That's it. She can't be in a library. She never stops talking. You can't, she won't, it won't work. That's not an environment that's going to work." But in my mind, that was a safe environment. And I thought, oh, she'd be safe if she could just be a librarian and we could keep her in the library. Life would be good. So get other people in the room, ask them their opinion, even if you're afraid of what the answer is going to be. It takes a village. It takes a village, and you need that type of input to even consider slightly different things that you as a family or you as a parent would not, not be open to, or it wouldn't be your go-to. You wouldn't typically be willing to try.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think a lot of parents fall into that trap a little bit of, you have a pretty clear idea for your child of what they're going to do. And that obviously runs up against reality sometimes. And it goes against everything we've been talking about so far all week about things being person-centered and self-determination. But it's hard as parents and acknowledging that it's, we're saying, take your child out into the community, participate as much as possible, but acknowledging that that's not easy. And we have a question that we have come in from one of our audience on Zoom. And they write, as a parent.
Can I jump in real quick?
Oh yeah, please.
But I just want to quote somebody by the name of Sean Roy, who I think this is something that I routinely will say with people on the provider end. And it goes something like this. And Sean is also a family member of someone with disabilities, and I think is probably one of the premier names in the field right now regarding this. I am yet to meet a family member who has not advocated for their son or daughter in the way that they feel is of their responsibility and what they should be doing. So it's always important for us to acknowledge, especially on the provider end of supports, that families are doing what families believe are in their best interest because they are family. And instead of looking at that as resistance, we have to look at that with understanding and tap into that social capital. And that's where I really just wanted to also celebrate Deb's comments in the chat box as well. Sorry, Mark, please.
No, please. I'm glad you said that. That's super important. And I really appreciate you acknowledging it. One question we do have, and they write, as a parent of a 14-year-old, I find that thinking about this whole process is very overwhelming. And I hear you say, find opportunities, but where do I start? Where do I start to find opportunities that will really be safe, meaningful, and lead to other things and relationships? So that question of where do I begin, really?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to repeat myself and say, yep. Oh, I'm sorry, Sue. Can I jump on?
Sure.
My fangs are out. Thank you. No, I truly believe people have already started. All right. And I think that there's strength and acknowledgement in that. And I think when we're talking about, well, really, how does this become something that's gradual, consistent, and doable? We want to continually help define, in what I call a strength-based approach, what are interests, build on that, continue surveying one's interests. Do that, as Deb's point is, through immersion and participation in the community. You'll find that people will have less perceived identity on the person with disabilities and more about them as, oh, well, that's Joe who comes in for a cup of Joe on Tuesdays. And also, to the point on mapping, will also lead towards, I think, better outcomes, where I think as a state and really as a country, we struggle with natural supports. But I find that if we do this in a low, steady, like a good barbecue approach, the outcomes are going to be there, but they won't be overnight at once, nor should things that I think are meaningful in life come that easy. Sue, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and Key, it's a great point that you make. And also, Mark, I had seen that comment before you read it, and I thought, that is so true. And I think I'm the one who said find opportunities, and I'm actually so glad that person wrote into that comment, because it's good to expand upon that and even clarify it more. And really, the way I think about that finding opportunity is kind of how Key was describing it. It's not even so much finding opportunities in the community. It's finding opportunities within your family, within your family member that you're worried about, to see what are the interests, what are the things that are enjoyable to all our family and our individual family member. And then taking that a step further and not looking for that in the community, but creating an opportunity for people to join you. So I'm very influenced by a wonderful conversation that we had actually with my friends from RIPIN several months ago, with an organization that has really transformed their thinking about how to support families. And it's not so much about providing support, but it's more about helping people be able to think about their family, think about their family's interests, think about what they enjoy doing, not basing their thinking about, we have a family member with a disability and we need support, but more about, we're a family who enjoys artwork, we're a family who enjoys gardening, we're a family who enjoys music. And then coming up with an opportunity, very small, it could be with just a few people, to invite a couple people in your neighborhood, perhaps, or some other community that you're connected with, a faith-based group, or maybe even some folks from school, to join you in participating in that activity. So it's kind of a reverse of, you're not out there looking for something, you're creating something based upon what you all love. Not a support need, but a life-enhancing kind of outlook instead. It's hard, but it's a different way to think about it.
Yeah. I think that it can be difficult for parents and for family members to see, Key saying you've already started. And I think it can be hard to see that when you're so close to it. I think that's why the work that all of you do, whether it's the Fogarty Center, whether it's the social workers that we all work and interact with, the peer professionals at RIPIN, I think it's really valuable and important, because you're able to sometimes show the family and show the parents something that they wouldn't be able to see because they are so close to it. And I wonder if anyone wants to comment and speak to that a little bit, about how you work with parents to sort of help them see, when you talk about strength-based approaches, how do you help somebody identify what those strengths are when maybe it doesn't come so naturally to them?
So Mark, I'm going to share, and I see that Deb shared in the chat as well, that sometimes hobbies, things that people enjoy, can really be a catalyst and a connector to something else. Looking back when my daughter was 14, all I could do was get through dinner. It was like, what's for dinner? If I can make it to the end of the day and it's time for her to go to bed, we're good. If we could make it through the day, that would be good. Don't expect everything to be complete or done by the time they finish high school. I remember in 6th grade, when she was in 6th grade, a teacher coming to me and saying, I think she could go to college. Oh, really? Okay. Now that was a game changer. So it's like we were kind of focusing on life skills. We were kind of going down one path, and then all of a sudden we found out that she might be able to obtain another path. Uh, so we did. Okay, we're going to encourage this. We're going to work towards this. Of course, some of the other things, fell off the radar and we didn't quite get to. But when we did get through high school together, and many of us worked together to get through high school together, some of my friends at RIPIN were first to remind me that I needed to listen to her and listen to what she was advocating for and what she was telling me. Because I was that parent, just take the diploma. Let's graduate, we need to get out. We need to be done. We need to be done with this. And I was just focused on that. And she was just ready to prove me wrong again and again. And she said, no, I'm not ready to graduate and I need to go to a transition program. And I don't want to go to college full time. And I don't want to do this. Hey, why don't I go to college and go to work and I'll do every part time? And, and of course I was like, no, you need to go to college. You need to do it for 4 years and you just need to get it over with. Well, fortunately, she won out, as she usually does, and because she knows herself better than anyone else. And she's finding great balance right now in her life. She works part-time. She goes to school part-time. She has some different groups of friends, always looking to expand that or to find friends that maybe have different interests that connect to hers or, grow those relationships. And I was one of those parents who thought everything's going to be fine once she graduates from high school, right? Like the disability was just going to disappear or something. I don't know what I was, like a headache, take an aspirin, it'll be fine, right? You're going to be fine. And it was like, that was just the beginning. When she left high school, all of a sudden that was her social world. And now we were in the adult world and it was like, we need to meet new people. Like, are you kidding me? But fortunately, what she did as what we did as a younger family and trying to make those connections helped later on with the natural supports. It's like, oh yeah, remember that girl that was always so nice in Girl Scouts? Guess what? She's going to junior college too. And she's, we can carpool. Oh, that's terrific. So, just, sometimes you have to have a little bit of faith. And everyone that's here today and everyone that's been visiting our conference this week, it's networking. It's all about networking, and pick up the phone and call RIPIN. And, and when we don't have a resource for you, we connect you to our other friends like Advocates in Action and the Autism Project and, Sherlock Center. And we work with all these different groups so that we can help you find the resources, because it's a part-time job. I remember feeling when the kids were young, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to quit my job to try to figure out how to identify what my kids need and to make sure they're successful in school.
Yeah, I think that brings us really right back to what we started talking about, which is our connection with other people and our relationships and how we derive support and just expanded opportunities, but also just our life expands when we're connected with other people. And we are in a driven society. We have this, so we've got to achieve, or we've got to reach a certain potential, and we only have a limited amount of time to do it. We've got our whole lives to grow and change, different opportunities and different friendships, and discover things about ourselves. There's a lot of folks who go down a typical path, let's say, and then many years beyond when you would think, okay, they're going to be working or in a job. No, they're reinventing themselves all over again. And we all have the opportunity to do that. I keep saying opportunity. I know it's a challenge, but we all have the great benefit of appreciating and living lives where we experience all of it, all the emotions, all the challenges, all the joys. And sometimes it's giving ourselves a break and reaching out to others to say, I need some help right now. I need some help to think differently. And RIPIN is wonderful for that. RIPIN is a wonderful organization of parents and community members and people who really understand how to help support each other and help people make connections. And I keep saying this phrase, but see differently.
And you can contact RIPIN at 401-270-0101. Send us an email at callcenter@ripin.org. We do these informational webinars and workshops, but we also provide that one-on-one support to help guide folks a little bit. And you can definitely give us a call, and we'll do our best to help you, our peer professionals. We're about 5 minutes left, and we have a couple more questions that I want to make sure we get to. The first is, can I use my child's IEP to identify strengths that are not just related to reading and writing?
Absolutely, because the IEP should be including those functional strengths and skills, or maybe even you may have some functional goals in the IEP that the student is working towards. So that's a great place to start, is with the IEP process and the team, to help you identify what are you good at, right? And what do you love doing, and what puts a smile on her face. And guaranteed, when you nurture those things, that spills over into other areas.
Yeah, I would say use planning time for your whole life, not just particular things. Whole life planning that you're thinking about.
Excellent. That's great. Another question. What transition programs are available in the Rhode Island area? I have a few students on the spectrum in the 12th grade. We do work with ORS, they write. So what other transition programs are available out there? It can be a lot to take in. I know there's quite a bit out there.
Right. So, and I'd love for you to call RIPIN so that we can have a further conversation. However, on Friday, our friends from ORS will be with us at 3:00 on Friday, and we'll be talking about employment. However, there are some transition programs within school districts and also within the state that are statewide. Okay, so yesterday, Teresa Curran was with us and was speaking a little bit about the Rhode Island Transition Academy at West Bay. And that is a program that, that's been around for more than 12 years now. And, we've had many students transition through that program. And there are others. There's a tech center in Northern Rhode Island. There's a transition academy down in South County, and Providence School Department has its own transition academy. And I'm looking at Sue Hayward and East Bay Transition Academy, which is housed out of Roger Williams University. So there are statewide programs as well as some local within school districts. So I encourage you to give our call center a call, and we'd be happy to, share. And also check out the resources web page on the RIPIN website, because we have all these little toolboxes, which I really like how they're broken up, alternate toolboxes. And towards the bottom of the page, there is a lot of resources just for transition to adulthood. So check that out as well.
Just add to that and say, say this was a different conversation about college, right? What would we want to do? We want to support people making informed decisions and shop around a little bit. So I greatly encourage you to visit the RIPIN website and then do some further research to kind of really see with your loved one where they see themselves being the most successful. If there's a particular organization that has a certain niche, maybe with a certain industry that they're interested in, awesome. That's where I think natural relationship building and skill set building can occur in the same breath. That's a great question.
So we're just about out of time, just about less than a minute left. And we have just one more question I want to get to. If we didn't get to your question today, again, feel free to call RIPIN, contact us, send us an email, and we'll do our best to help. The question is, are IEP, SLP, and ILP all the same, or are they separate and work together to help my child? How do those interact?
So that's a great question. They are all separate. However, You really want to make sure that you're pulling the team in together so that they are working together, because it would make no sense to have different goals and not accomplishing them. So if you can make sure that the teacher that's overseeing the independent learning plan and the teacher that's coordinating the individual education plan, that we're bringing them together in the same room. If your child's working with a reading or literacy coach, make sure they're in the room so that those plans are all coordinated. Then when you move on from high school, if you qualify for services through the adult system, you might need an ISP, which is an individual service plan. And Crystal has experience with that and has worked with folks who have gone into adult services and taken the documentation and what we learned during the high school experience and really helped to create the meaningful life that the individual wants, and creating a plan that would support that individual to achieve their goals. That's the short answer. That's the Reader's Digest version?
Definitely the abridged version. And folks, we are out of time. I want to thank everybody who joined us today in our audience for all these great questions. I want to thank my RIPIN colleagues, Sue and Crystal. And I especially want to thank our guests, Susan Hayward and Key O'Donnell, for joining us and sharing all this great information. We're going to be back tomorrow, Thursday, day 4 of our Transition to Adulthood Week series. Tomorrow, we will be talking about non-employment. That's Friday. What's tomorrow?
Tomorrow's post-secondary education.
Post-secondary education
right.
and
So
training.
We're going to be talking
tomorrow.
about college and universities, and is that possible? Is that in my plan? And what's next? So some interesting folks are going to be joining us tomorrow on that.
All right. We hope you'll join us as well. Everybody, thanks again for being with us, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Take care.
Thank
Honor
you.
and privilege. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yes, thank you.
Love and respect.